Washington Journal continues.
Columnist and author Michelle Malkin is our guest for the next hour on the Washington Journal. Who Built That is her most recent book. First line in this book: many of you know me as that angry brown lady on cable TV who's always yelling at liberals.
Yeah,
Why'd you start there?
Well, you know, I have built up a persona, obviously, not only over the last quarter century that I've worked in print journalism, but certainly over the last decade that I've been on TV. And you know, as I think as a natural result of those appearances, people have derived a sense that I'm always that, you know, wet, tightly wound up person who's always yelling, always mad. And this book obviously was inspired by the phrase, "You didn't build that," from Obama, but it is not an angry book. And so I wanted to sort of jar people right away and then pivot, because ultimately it's a celebration of American history.
Well, let's go back to 2012 when that comment was made by the president and what you built on off that comment.
And you know, there are a lot of wealthy, successful Americans who agree with me, because they want to give something back. They know they didn't. Look, if you've been successful, you didn't get there on your own. You didn't get there on your own. I'm always struck by people who think, well, it must be because I was just so smart. There are a lot of smart people out there. It must be because I worked harder than everybody else. Let me tell you something. There are a whole bunch of hard-working people out there. If you were successful, somebody along the line gave you some help. There was a great teacher somewhere in your life. Somebody helped to create this unbelievable American system that we have that allowed you to thrive. Somebody invested in roads and bridges. If you got a business, you didn't build that. Somebody else made that happen. The internet didn't get invented on its own. Government research created the internet, so then all the companies could make money off the internet. The point is that when we succeed because of our individual initiative, but also because we do things together.
Michelle Malkin, listening to that, you've been shaking your head for the last 2 minutes.
Yeah, and you know, I'm ending up with a smile on my face only because I feel pity for the president, because I found that entire diatribe to be both historically ignorant and cynically demagogic. And I think people often forget, and I'm so glad that you played that passage in its entirety, because it wasn't merely about arguing that other people helped you. You could hear the dripping contempt he has for individual inventors and entrepreneurs who firmly believe, and rightly so, that it is their initiative. It's the individual conception and vision of these makers and builders that provide innovation. And I am chilled, and I hope every entrepreneur who is responsible for a business that he or she has built is also chilled by the fact that there was a rousing applause and clapping when he said in that kind of sneering little tone of his, "You think you're so smart? You think you work harder?" Well, actually, President Obama, there are smarter people than him, and certainly smarter than me in this world, who have done far more good than all of these top-down central planners who think they're responsible for innovation in America.
From Who Built That, profit is now treated as a profanity in today's class warfare poison discourse. Those who seek financial enrichment for the fruits of their labor and creativity, you write, are cast as greedy villains, selfish barons, and rapacious beasts. And so are the wealthy investors who support them.
Yes, and that kind of wealth shaming, this idea that people should be shamed by the fact that they pursue profits, is something that hasn't just lain there dormant since the statement that you just read. At Georgetown University just a couple of weeks ago, there was Obama showing contempt for people who have become financially successful. And in that specific case, he was talking about hedge fund managers, but he might as well have been talking about anyone who's in the 1% or the 10% or the 20%. And he argued that somehow these people were, quote unquote, society's lottery winners. Once again, in this passive aggressive way of his, denigrating their individual achievements. And I just feel very compelled, and that's why I wrote the book, to make sure that if parents and grandparents can get this book into the hands of their children and read these stories aloud, it really is a treasury of stories about unsung American inventors and tinkerers. You know, I came up with this new little neologism for it, tinkerpreneurs, which is very distinct from sort of the grand great inventors that we all know, the Thomas Edisons of the world, who get, I don't know, 5 minutes of attention at least in the public schools. But many of the people that I highlight get no attention at all. And I've been marveling with a lot of fellow geeks. I came out of the closet as a geek, a science geek, that it's very rare that kids in school today learn about the George Westinghouses of the world and the Nikola Teslas of the world and Willis Carrier. And you think about the fact that many of these businesses are still in business today, which is what makes them even more remarkable. And so I think filling that vacuum and providing some sort of a vaccine against this disease of collectivism was very important to me.
Well, who is Tony Maglica? And we're looking at a picture of him and you in California.
Tony Maglica is the president of Mag Instrument, and really I think the prototypical American dream inventor and businessman. Of course, I would imagine that a lot of your viewers are very familiar with his product. It's the iconic Maglite flashlight, used not only by law enforcement and first responders in this country and around the world, but one of those household items that's essentially a necessity. And he really did revolutionize the flashlight industry in the late 1970s. I got to go out to his headquarters as part of my research, and boy, I just still get tingles and chills up my legs thinking about the fact that this 84-year-old man every single day to this day goes to his headquarters at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. He's the last employee to leave. He employs 800 people, very proud American business owner, immigrant from off the coast of a tiny little island off of Croatia called Zlarin. I tell his personal story, and I tell about his ongoing battles against stupid government regulations and stupid government taxes and the entire scheme, you know, that prevent him from innovating even further. But ultimately, I think the takeaway from his story is the sense of persistence and perseverance. He's made hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. He could stop. You know, you think about Obama a couple of years ago saying, at a certain point, you've made enough money. He actually said that. But he fundamentally misunderstands what drives so many of these American business owners and makers. It's not merely about making money. Certainly they want to make a profit, but they have this drive, this ineluctable drive to continue to make things better.
Who built that? This is about Roebling, the Roeblings. San Francisco's majestic Golden Gate Bridge celebrated its 75th anniversary in 2012. New York City's George Washington Bridge marked its 80th anniversary in 2011. Brooklyn Bridge, 130 in 2013. Covington, Cincinnati Suspension Bridge turned 148 years old in 2014. Who built all that, you write? The answer lies not with bureaucrats, unions, or public works collectivists, but with 3 individual love stories intertwined in one unforgettable family.
I loved this. It's a soap opera and a historical thriller all rolled into one. The story of the Roebling family, John Roebling, Washington Roebling, and Emily Roebling. David McCullough wrote a fabulous book about the Brooklyn Bridge, which of course the Roebling family was responsible for. But I wrote this chapter, what inspired it, I think what the catalyst was another quote from Vice President Joe Biden, and I quoted it in the introduction to the book, where he claimed that every major great thing that's ever been done in America was the result of government in the 18th, 19th, 20th, and 21st century, something like that. And it's almost like a knee-jerk talking point of these progressive Democrats to refer to infrastructure. That's why you had Obama talking about roads and bridges. And my alternate lesson was to talk about how it was private capitalists who provided all the building materials for these bridges that they're always claiming as government innovations. And John Roebling was the innovator behind wire rope. And so the story of his coming here to America from Germany, the hardships that he faced, and in particular the reverence that he had not only for American exceptionalism, but for making a profit. Yes, he was an unabashed capitalist, and I want children to know that. But it seems like such a simple thing, and that's why I picked things like a flashlight and wire rope cable and the bottle cap, which I have in a separate chapter, because they're such—
And root beer.
And root beer, yes, Charles Heyer's root beer, because they're such mundane things that we take for granted. And I think that in a 21st century internet age, when the kids are so enamored of, they have their noses stuck in their devices, and the only things that they seem to revere are high-tech things. We always talk about the rock stars of Silicon Valley. Well, these were the rock stars of the industrial age, and having an appreciation for these small conveniences that we don't give a second thought to, that was a real inspiration for me.
Well, Edwin Christian tweets into you, I agree, success comes through a lot of sources. You may be very smart, but someone taught you innovation comes from multiple ideas.
Well, it certainly does, and I pay great respect and give great credit to the ultimate shoulders that we all stand on when it comes to innovation, and that is the founding fathers. And certainly, of course, all of the tinkerpreneurs that I mention would give credit to other people. But I think that if you do not give ultimate credit to the original sources of the ideas, then it's an absolute offense to the idea that the founding fathers had, which is embedded in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, which is that the fruits of one's mind and the fruits of one's labor should be rewarded. And this idea that an individual's intellectual property rights should be protected, that there should be the fuel of interest for the fire of genius, is a recognition that ultimately it comes from one source, not from many. Yes, we can all grant that somebody has helped us along the way, but it wasn't government that is ultimately responsible for progress and innovation in America.
Michelle Malkin, before we go to calls, a couple of current policy issues. First of all, gyrocopter man. We just talked to Doug Hughes on the program. What do you think of the fact that he landed right over here on the lawn and his message?
Well, I think just as a geek, the gyrocopter's pretty cool. And I cop to owning a drone, so, but separate and apart from that, I think, we've had a lot of alarming security incidents right over there, and I still think that there needs to be some ultimate scrutiny and accountability for many of the botched handling of these breaches at the White House, and certainly from a political perspective, it's not a problem that is simply simply isolated, under the Obama administration. I wrote a lot about these kinds of breaches under the Bush administration as well. So, worrisome.
2016, right now, who do you like?
I always hesitate to answer that question, because what will happen is there'll be some isolated soundbite of one positive thing I've said about a candidate, and all of a sudden it turns into an endorsement. It's always a tricky thing, particularly on the right side of the aisle, where obviously I come from, because there are so many people, particularly here in the Washington bubble, who are so vested, and they get so mad if you say something either remotely positive or remotely negative about their candidate. I am on team conservative, okay? That's the camp that I'm in. I would like to have the most conservative candidate possible. I've been fairly outspoken about many of the candidates who I think absolutely fail that test. I am not a fan of Jeb Bush. I am not a fan of Mike Huckabee. I am not a fan of Marco Rubio. I'm not a fan of John Kasich. I'm not a fan of a lot of these people who have either dipped their toes in the water or are brazenly out right there running already, mostly because I have a lot of core signature issues. And to me, these are litmus tests of where people stand on important issues of education and limited government and national security. If you were for the Gang of Eight, if you carried water for the Gang of Eight bill, I don't like you. If you at any point in your political career have endorsed the abomination called Common Core, I don't like you. And then we get, of course, to the people who have made these convenient, had these convenient changes of heart right around the time they're about to announce or form an exploratory committee. And this, to me, is a litmus test of character. Really? You really expect me to buy your change of heart that is cynically timed to, when you need to get donations from grassroots conservative donors? So, I've also said that I've liked a lot of what Ted Cruz stands for. I think that whether you agree or disagree with him, this is someone who's very passionate about his principles, and I've followed his work for a long time. He, I think, most closely mirrors many of my views, although I have to say on some core immigration issues I'm concerned, not only with regard to the so-called path to citizenship for the 13 to 30 million illegal aliens who are here, but also in terms of temporary work visas and H-1B. And in that regard, we have Scott Walker, who's come along and said some things that have roiled up some people, because he's finally acknowledged some of the abuses of the H-1B program and has paid explicit attention now to some of the issues that Jeff Sessions has talked about. I wish Jeff Sessions would run for president, because I would sign up in a heartbeat.
Who Built That is the name of the book. Michelle Malkin is the author, and Fred in Jessup, Maryland. Republican line, you're first up.
Yes, Michelle.
Hi.
God bless you for what you do. You're the voice of reason for us conservatives. You're unafraid. You support American values, and you stand up for common sense. And I wanted to praise you for that. Talking about the like the gyrocopter thing, it's scary to know that the government has been, like, take for instance, the man warned them way ahead of time that what he was going to do, and they did nothing. The underwear bomber, the underwear bomber's father went to the FBI and told him ahead of time what was going to happen, and they let him board a flight. You know what I mean? It boggles the mind. The Boston bombers,
yes.
The Russians told us what was going on, and they ignored that, and they allowed it to happen. What's going on?
Yeah, those are great examples to cite, and it's actually an extension.
No. Go ahead, Michelle.
Yeah, it's actually an extension of some of the security breaches and failures to share intelligence that I wrote about in my first book, Invasion. Not only is there a lot of stovepiping and lack of communication between many of these interagency databases, but obviously one hand doesn't know what the other hand is doing. And if they can't capitalize on intelligence that they're actually handed to them on a silver platter, how can we do anything else? These are grave matters of national security, and it certainly doesn't help when you have many progressives and open borders types in both the Republican and Democrat parties who are doing things to block basic kinds of information sharing. Specifically, of course, when we talk about these databases on, criminal alien databases and sharing that's supposed to be going on between local, state, and federal authorities.
Michelle Malkin, the effect of marijuana legalization on your home state of Colorado.
It's still up in the air, and I guess literally it is in the air. I've lived in Colorado now for 8 years. We live in Colorado Springs, and when we first arrived, of course, there were plenty of medical marijuana shops. I mean, I guess you could say there's almost one on every corner, next to the Starbucks. And from a parental standpoint, that is definitely a concern. And with the advent now of recreational shops, I can certainly see, from the war on drugs standpoint, why many conservatives are concerned and are always joking about it. But I actually think it's a good thing that we have these sort of living laboratories. Of course, our referendum passed, and then Washington State followed. And in each case, it's been quite a bit of work for the state legislature to craft regulations to make it work. And I've been outspoken as a huge critic of the war on drugs. And my eyes were first opened when I was working as a columnist at the Seattle Times. I had firmly opposed a medical marijuana initiative there until I became exposed to many of the patients for whom medical marijuana has been a benefit. And my mind was opened, and I changed my mind. People always ask me, have you ever changed your mind on any issue? Yes, I have, on this one. And I wrote a heartfelt column last year. My mother-in-law was dying of melanoma, and my husband and I took a trip to a pot shop in Pueblo. You can actually look it up on michellemalkin.com on my blog. And I talked about how I was rather impressed with the way these businesses were conducting themselves, the amount of security, the professionalism. And it seems to me when the Republican Party talks about wanting to do outreach to non-traditional constituencies, here you have mostly, in many cases, libertarian business people who now find themselves complaining about taxes and regulation. I talked to the girl at the pot shop, and she sounded like she could be a card-carrying Republican. And I think that there are a lot of Republicans who now see, opportunity here. Again, with the caveat that, there have to be consequences for breaking the rules and regulations. And I think that Colorado is a model for, how other states will be doing this. I know isn't there a debate here in D.C. about the issue as well?
Yeah, some strange rule that you can buy it or you can own it, but you can't buy it or you can't. Yeah, it's an odd rule.
Yeah.
Kathy is in Albuquerque, and she is a Democrat. You're on with Michelle Malkin, Kathy.
Yes, Michelle. I know you're a lot smarter than I am about a lot of things, but you just seem so focused and so divisive. I see. It's kind of funny how we perceive things. I see what Obama was talking about as a community. It takes everybody. We're all in this together. I don't see it as you do, that he was trying to disparage the wealthy. And I don't disparage the wealthy either. I just think that sometimes people focus too much on the money, and just as you said, we need to give credit to the people. It seemed like you're more focused on giving credit for a person that developed something, and I know that's important and that's a lot of hard work, but what about the doctor, the one person that invented, he didn't want a patent, he didn't want to make money for the antibiotic he created. He was more concerned about the community, and I think that's more important.
Are you referring to Jonas Salk?
Yes.
The polio vaccine? Okay.
I believe that. That's his name.
All right.
But Yes, and it sometimes I think we focus so much more on that, but I think it takes all of us together, and that's what I see Obama saying. I don't see him disparaging the wealthy at all. And
All right, Kathy, let's get a response from Michelle Malkin.
Well, I think the context is important, because the context of Obama's remarks back then in 2012 and the context of his remarks disparaging wealthy people as lottery winners just 2 weeks ago, the context was Obama's push to levy more punitive taxes on the wealthy. And he said explicitly that families that belonged to these hedge fund managers had more than they needed, more than enough. And the context of all of these remarks is that wealthy people are selfish and that they need to give back more so that Obama can redistribute the money and invest it in poor people. Because somehow people who pursue their own self-interest aren't benefiting anybody else. And that's exactly the philosophy that I'm pushing against. It's interesting that you mentioned Jonas Salk and the polio vaccine, because of course he wouldn't have been able to pursue that in his benevolent way, which you talk about, if not for other private capitalists contributing to it. And so one of the chapters that I talk about and who built that is the chapter on Willis Carrier and the air conditioning company that he and Irving Lyle and their partners built and profited from, yes, and made lots of money on and put all of their blood, sweat, and tears and equity into, because their air conditioning business allowed the conditions and climate for Jonas Salk to preserve those vaccines and bring them to market. So I think, yes, we perceive things differently, and I think it's important that, in particular, that children have more of a balance in their diet when they learn about how things come to market, how things become successful, and who really is benefiting the public interest. Yes, I know, Obama cares, but guess what? Capitalists care about bringing their products to market, and that benefits everybody else in the world.
James is in Glenside, Pennsylvania on our Republican line. James, go ahead.
Hey, good morning. This is for Michelle. I'm just very proud of your fundamentalist attitude towards our country. I grew up as a Marine Major's son, and I realized I was a flag waver back in the day. You know, I'd go to the 4th of July parade and watch the marching bands, and I realized back growing up that our country is the greatest country in the world, and I think the message should be spread, and you are doing a hell of a job of that. And I just want to thank you so much for your fundamentalism in American greatness, because we are the greatest country in the world, and people that look down on us or speak badly about us or how we're doing wrong and how we can't step up on our own and do well for ourselves are, in my eyes, idiotic. Because, you know, I'm not a rich man. I'm actually a lower middle class person that is proud of my country and the opportunities that I have. And I just want to say thank you for standing for those values.
That's James in Glenside, Pennsylvania.
You could hear the emotion in his voice. And, you know, I guess there are a lot of cynical people out there who just don't have the same kind of feeling. You certainly see that kind of anti-Americanism mirrored in Hollywood and elite circles and academia. And I agree with him, yes. It is definitely worth reminding people not to take for granted what we have here. And obviously my own perspective is, and I've talked about this many times, I think that you know, sharing your own personal story is very important. And the Obama and the left are very good at telling stories. I think that free market conservatives and pro-capitalist conservatives need to tell their stories more as well, and that's why I told all of these stories in the book.
You also talk about Tom Perkins in the book. Who is Tom Perkins?
Yes, he is a very famous San Francisco area venture capitalist. I put him in the introduction to the book because I was struck. I was moved by an op-ed that he had written in the Wall Street Journal. Actually, I think it was a letter to the editor of the Wall Street Journal, where he was defending the 1%. Now, just as background, Tom Perkins is not some Fox News fire-breathing Republican, and he's a friend of Al Gore. He's on the opposite side of the aisle as I am, but he was sick and tired of the Occupy Wall Street demagoguery against the rich. And so he compared what he had seen in San Francisco and Oakland during the heyday of the Occupy Wall Street protests. Remember, they were hurling Molotov cocktails and at corporate buildings in Oakland, setting things on fire. And he compared it to Kristallnacht. And so this, of course, roiled all of the circles, the punditry circles. They were, all sorts of people were demanding apologies for the analogy that he made, but I thought it was absolutely apt. He was warning about the danger of demonizing a minority of wealthy creators and wealth creators in our country. And fortunately, he did not back down from his main point. But again, I think that this idea that that somehow private venture capitalists are the enemy and need to be punished for their success was insidious to me. That's what sparked the idea of the book, and his letter really did say it all.
Ed is in Anaheim, California on our independent line. Ed, you're on with Michelle Malkin, most recent book, Who Built That?
Miss Michelle, I'm very Ross Perot-ian. Can you hear me?
Yes,
We're
I can.
listening. Ed, go ahead.
Okay. I'm very Ross Perot-ian in my politics. I believe in truth, facts, results, and I make my judgments based upon the results mostly. I listened to you before years ago, and when I go for my walks in the morning, I thought about what you said, and, you know, the smallest unit of measurement is a micron. Miss Michelle, you don't even have a micron of understanding of what you're talking about. The people that you admire, the rich, when you really go down and see how they really made their money, they lie, they cheat, they steal. I'll use your example of the mag light. Those of us that know what we're talking about know that the mag light is a pirated design, military design from the 1950s for a waterproof, shockproof flashlight. From Edison to Bill Gates, they didn't do it on. Edison didn't create nothing. He pirated mostly Nikola Tesla's idea. Bill Gates, when he bought DOS, he told them it was going to be free. He was going to give it to the colleges so kids could learn how to program computers. He ran straight to IBM, told IBM, "You have exclusive rights to it." IBM signed off on it. He even got sued for that.
All right, Ed, you've given us two examples. You want to put a period on your statement?
Is that I believe in a free market, but I believe in a well-regulated free market. The purpose of government is to protect us from the excesses of the greed. And
all right, you know what, Ed? We're going to leave it there and get a response from Michelle Malkin.
Yeah, Anthony Maglica first patented his first design for the Maglite in 1979, and it's an amazing story of individual achievement. So I don't know what he's talking about. I would say that certainly there are many big businesses and crony businesses that act in an unethical manner. And of course, I believe in protecting the intellectual property of business people. That's why I support what used to be our strong patent system. And that, of course, has been turned on its head under the Obama administration, and there are even efforts this past week to enrich big business cronies and lawyers at the expense of garage tinkerers and small inventors. There have also been cases, and I talk about some of them in the book, where unethical business people tried to prevent the true creators of their work from pursuing their best interests. And that certainly happened when George Westinghouse and Nikola Tesla teamed up against Edison and J.P. Morgan. So I don't see where we actually disagree, and in many cases I've been very outspoken about those businesses that want to rely on government as a crutch. I have long been an opponent of corporate welfare, long before Solyndra became a household word. So I would recommend that he actually read the book. And that always seems to be a problem with people when they jump to conclusions about what lessons I'm trying to teach and what they should draw from it.
Wild and Wonderful tweets into you, I can take pride in my business without denying the impact along the way of so many people and the benefit of roads, etc.
Great. I mean, again, I think, and maybe it bears repeating because I don't know if people are really understanding that the context of Obama's public remarks about millionaires and billionaires is really important, and particularly because of the hypocrisy. Here's somebody who, for political gain, will demagogue the wealthy and then turn around and get on a private jet and raise money from them in Manhattan or Hollywood.
Dee Dee, do you think monopolies and oligopolies stifle small business creation?
Absolutely, and I talk about many of the trusts. The chapter on Westinghouse and Tesla, I think, was particularly interesting because here was George Westinghouse, who was trying to conduct his business, many incredible businesses, in an ethical way. I am a champion of ethical capitalism, where people do not rely on government rigging the game for them in any way. And so that doesn't just mean opposing the kind of green energy handouts that Obama was responsible for, but just to possibly satisfy some of the lefty viewers out there. I've been very critical of the kind of GOP-backed crony capitalism or crony socialism, if you want to call it, venture socialism, when it comes to handing out government subsidies for stadiums and such that obviously benefit big businesses. I also don't like the H-1B program because it benefits these big tech corporations and big Silicon Valley interests at the expense of American workers. And I think that, if you actually listen to what I'm saying and read what I'm writing, you'll find that you agree with me more than you disagree.
NSA bulk collection.
Yeah.
And the Freedom Act, the Patriot Act. Your view.
Yeah. Once again, we come to one of these interesting issues where on the right, there's a lot of disagreement. I was a supporter of the Patriot Act under the Bush administration, and because of the work I had done on World War II and the need for the kind of intelligence gathering that took place during World War II to fight that war, I'd been much more supportive of the NSA than a lot of my libertarian friends. And to the extent that the courts have ruled that they've overstepped their bounds, I agree with that. But I think the idea of abolishing the NSA is very foolish. And you hear that from some of the extreme circles of the libertarian wing of our party.
Grace in Memphis, Democrat, thanks for holding. You're on with Michelle Malkin.
Thank you very much. I would like to say Michelle really needs to get her facts straight, because the fact of the matter is that Elizabeth Warren said who built that, not the president. But in the meantime, she's attributing it to the president because, as noted on Fox News, she's divisive and she doesn't like this president. There are many things that he has done that I don't like. But in the meantime, we are a sum total, PJ says, of everything that has happened in our lives. And apparently she has had a miserable life because she's negative. Positive people usually put the royal forward. But she is destroying the interfluency of this rural. I don't like her, period. Thank you for letting me have my say. I really don't like her. With the smile on your face, which is an ignorant smile, you are ignorant, hon.
That's Grace in Memphis. Michelle Malkin.
Well, I hope she has some cookies and milk and feels better.
Do you ever, and I'm just kind of going through the tweets here, and there's several I can't read or will read, but do you ever get tired of the back and forth?
No, I don't. I love it, actually. I mean, I've been in this business now for a quarter century. And of course, with the advent of social media and immediate responses you can get now on Twitter, it's a flood where it used to just be a trickle, because you'd have to wait for the actual mail, the snail mail to come, right? But it's funny she says that I'm so negative, because every day I wake up in the morning and I can't believe that I can do what I do. Only in America can I make a living and put food on the table running my mouth off. That's an amazing thing, and I marvel at that, and I have a fierce appreciation for the First Amendment in this country, and particularly as a woman of color. You know, I've been in other parts of the world where I've been reminded of what my place and station would have been, but for the fact that, you know, my parents decided to risk it all and come here, and that this was a place that embraced people who had a hard work ethic and embraced the principles of the American dream. So, you know, the hate tweets and the hate mail, it comes with the territory. And it's interesting because over the last, I don't know, several months now, you've seen these think pieces appear about, you know, the poison that's spread on the internet and what should we do about it. And in particular, there have been a lot of left-leaning women who have sort of blown the whistle on the sexism, the racism, the misogyny that's out there. And a lot of us who are sort of have been outspoken conservative women who've you know, absorbed so much of this with nary a concern from the New York Times editorial board are wondering, hello? But, you know, my answer to negative speech has always been more and better speech. And that's why I have not stopped doing what I do.
Lee, Sterling, Virginia, Republican line. Hi, Lee.
Hi, good morning. Good morning, Michelle. I really, you know, I'm a Republican, but at the same time, I think I know what you're saying. I kind of wish that, I think because it's coming from perhaps an aggressive way, and hear me out when I say that, people I think misinterpreting it. And for me personally, you know, I do appreciate innovation. I appreciate hard work, and that's how I've been able to be successful, and a lot of my friends have. You know, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, very poor. Mom, you know, immigrated from Russia, so got to learn, you know, what it means to work hard to get what you need, but learned the opportunity of what this great country can provide. But I must say that if it wasn't for the Navy to accept me to, you know, go to boot camp and to, you know, learn a craft, and then get the GI Bill, you know, went to Iraq, went to Afghanistan, and then get the GI Bill to get my degrees, you know, get a bachelor's, and I went on my own, get a master's, etc. I don't want to say it was a handout. I mean, I worked hard for it, but it was a little boost, a little nitrous that the government provided me for my effort. But they provided me to say, hey, all right, now you go ahead, you know, get your degrees, get your education, and frankly, that's the reason why you know, that's one of the reasons why I'm successful today. So I think, you know, I do agree the importance of hard work and importance of innovation. And I think when Obama was saying that, I don't think he was knocking that per se. How I took it was, he was saying that the government can play a role to provide a little nitrous, a little oomph to folks that want to innovate, that want to work hard. And I think that's a point that I think it's lost in translation of what you're saying, because I think that is something you are saying, but it just seems like you're coming from a very aggressive perspective. And
all right, that's Lee. Let's leave it there, Lee. Michelle Malkin.
I think it's because I was listening to the tone. I think that's lost. And a lot of people who will respond, very aggressively on Obama's behalf will say that if you just look at the words, you didn't build that, and then he talks about all the other people who helped along the way. He talks about public school teachers. If you just look at the plain words on the page, sure, I agree with that. Obviously, other people helped along the way, and there are many stories in the book where I talked about all the people who helped along the way for each and every one of the innovators that I celebrate. But remember, go back and listen to that. I mean, you played the clip at the very beginning there. You think you're so smart. You didn't work as hard. You didn't build that. I bristle at that. I think that there is an underlying demagoguery that has festered, particularly in ivory tower circles, about a very basic debate between individualism and collectivism. And that's what I'm responding to.
Michelle Malkin, you earlier referred to your on-air person as a persona. People who meet you in the green room or know you outside of this television studio often say very nice things about you. That you're a very, very nice person. Is this somebody different who comes on the air?
You know, when I say persona, what I mean, I don't mean to say that that it is some kind of shtick. Because if you put me in front of a TV and you've got some, left-wing person on the other side who's saying something that I absolutely disagree with, and we only have 3 minutes to get our point across, yes, I'm going to grab every last breath of air I can to say what I need to say. And, particularly when it's some issue that I'm very passionate about, and I've talked about whether it's Common Core or amnesty or, whatever's put in front of me, Department of Justice, all the things that have been happening in places like Baltimore and Ferguson. And, I've built up a well of either outrage or passion about it. Yes, you can turn me on and I'm going to just go. But I think, outside of the cable TV box and the bubble, it's healthy just to remind people that, first of all, it's always funny because when I do speeches, people are like, oh, you actually have a bottom half, you have legs, because if you're doing this on a weekly basis and that's what people see, they kind of get it fixed in their mind that's all there is to you. And I think it's healthy to, to sort of get out of that box and remind people that you are a real person, which is why social media has been, such a part of my life. I've been known as an ink-stained wretch for most of my career as a newspaper columnist and a writer. But on social media, whether it's Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, people get a fuller sense of who you are. You get to show your full sense, your sense of humor, the things that interest you beyond politics. People know that I played Dungeons and Dragons when I was in high school, and we're big gamers now with our kids, and I play Settlers of Catan, and I love Sonic Cherry Limeade, and it just get a sort of sense of fuller picture of who you are behind that flat sort of pundit persona.
Walter in Eureka, California, independent line, please go ahead.
Thank you, C-SPAN, for presenting such an intelligent young person. It's a pleasure to see. Michelle, can you tell us a little bit about your educational background, and also what road did you take to get your books published? Thank you. I'll take my answer off the air.
Sure. I grew up in southern New Jersey. I went to public schools through 8th grade. I went to Holy Spirit High School in Absecon, New Jersey. I was a proud Spartan graduate of 1988. I went to Oberlin College, which has been in the news of late for many paroxysms of political correctness. I mentioned on Fox the other day that I was a classmate of Stephanie Rollins Blake, the mayor of Baltimore, who invoked a very infamous phrase of a concept that Oberlin perfected, the idea of having safe spaces where students should be protected from ideas with which they disagree. Oberlin was also in the news recently when Christina Hoff Sommers, a hero of mine, a outspoken conservative scholar and critic of much of the excesses of feminism, came to campus, and once again, all of the lefties and the faculty protected these students from the awful, awful conservative speech by invoking not only safe spaces, but trigger warnings. Because now you need to put a sign up that it's a trigger warning whenever you hear ideas that are anathema to your being. In terms of books, I wrote my first book in 2002 called Invasion, and published 4 books with Regnery before I moved to Simon & Schuster for Who Built That.
And by the way, Michelle Malkin a few years ago did our in-depth program. We did 3 hours with her. You can go to booktv.org and you can type in her name and in-depth, and then you'll be able to watch all 3 hours and learn more about her. But why would somebody who leans the way you do politically choose Oberlin?
Well,
with its reputation.
I am a lapsed classical pianist, and I think my mother had much higher ambitions for a musical career than I did. So I did study music theory and didn't do very well at the conservatory. The conservatory is very well known and very prestigious. Fortunately, political correctness has not corroded the reputation of the conservatory. But after I gave up those ambitions, I decided to just stay on at the Liberal Arts College and studied English and government.
And Carol is next, right here in the suburbs, Rockville, Maryland, Democrat.
Yeah, hi, Michelle. Hi, Peter.
Hi.
I would just like to say two things. First of all, I don't believe for 1 minute that people like Ted Cruz or the conservative right wing of the Republican Party really care about funding, education, the debt ceiling, fixing Medicare. I just don't believe that. I believe that their point is to sabotage, I have always believed, and continues to impede and obstruct and destroy the president's legacy. And I do have a question. And the question is, why would anyone vote for a Republican to run the government when they're so obviously anti-government?
Wow, there's a lot to unwrap there. First, again, this idea that Republicans don't care. Maybe it's a function of the Republican marketers' failure to really impress upon people what needs to be done to allow people to lift themselves up, to get themselves out of poverty. We've spent $22 trillion on the war on poverty, and yet Baltimore erupts in the same way that it did in the 60s and 70s. I started out my journalism career in Los Angeles, at the height of all of the chaos post Rodney King. How much money have we poured into these inner cities that have been, by the way, ruled by Democrats for decades and decades and decades? And somehow it's the Republican Party's fault that these places are still in ruins. The message of limited government conservatives is that money should be spent efficiently and wisely, not that it shouldn't be spent at all. And I just want to say one thing that I think illustrates the fact that there are conservatives who can reach across the aisle and agree with people on the other side about how to best how to best benefit, for example, our children. And that issue, as I mentioned before, is Common Core, because I find myself on the same side of many local teachers union leaders, progressives who are very, very upset about how Common Core has turned into a boondoggle to hand billions of dollars, public money, to big businesses like all of these tech companies, the Pearsons of the world. I'm on the same side. I was talking about it before a lot of the people on the left who are now criticizing it are. The question isn't whether we care less or more. It's about how we achieve our goals.
Final tweet, Rock Dots tweets in, she hates big government and regulation, but trusts the NSA not to overstep and spy on U.S. citizens.
I can see why, after many years of distrust, particularly of our national security agencies and our border security agencies, why she would feel that way. I acknowledge that. On the other hand, I think a sense of history and perspective about how we've waged war in the past and how we've been successful and how these functions are absolutely vital. That is a problem, I think, that Washington has helped create with their sense of incompetence in so many other areas. You had that caller earlier in the show who talked about the Tsarnaev case and the underwear bomber case. And I think to me, that's a compelling reason to put somebody in office who can act like an adult with a sense of seriousness about protecting our sovereignty and security.
Michelle Malkin has been our guest. Here is her most recent book, Who Built That, it is called. And one topic we didn't get to is the sex, drugs, rock and roll, and intrigue behind glass making, which I had no idea about until we read the book. So thank you, as always, for being on the Washington Journal.
Thank you, Peter.